AOS Coach here, and I am here with the Morgarite Steve Jobs himself. It is a top-performing ITC player. That is Brian Cox. Sorry, I'm laughing because I had this very serious introduction for you, but you've lifted the game. People have loved when I ran the luchador mask running for Sons of Behemoth. Now costumes are taking another level. Sorry, Matt the Nuge, you might have been replaced. I now have the entrepreneurial spirit, and we might actually need to embrace that because we'll get into the online feedback of Beast of Chaos, but we know that there's a new book. Things have fundamentally changed. So I want to get into the mind of a top performing player to think about how are they currently thinking about the new book. So without further ado, Brian Jobs Cox, welcome. G'day.
Thank you. I do want to correct you. I am a very serious player, as you can tell. My whole outfit, but yeah, thank you for having me and ready to go deep in Beasts of Chaos. A lot has changed if you've been unless you've been living under a rock, but it's a brand new world for the goats out there.
And I got to say, I do love the horns too. Like Gan has mentioned, I said it was very much like Tim the Enchanter from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. That was my type of. Actually, it's actually going to be my my Gur battle mage for my Cities of Sigmar. So maybe, just maybe, I need to find out the Amazon link and click your affiliate to get those horns because they are pretty sweet.
Yes.
But let's talk, man. Let's talk about this new book because unlike my show literally yesterday where Gloomspite Gits was like celebration and popping streamers and hooray, we've got, a whole bunch of battle tactics and grand strategies.
Mm-hmm.
This book has changed and it changed a lot. And I want to set the tone. And I don't want to seem negative here, but this book came out and I saw so much online negativity. It reminded me of when Nurgle changed. That was probably the biggest one that I saw.
Yeah.
That people were just upset that Nurgle had changed. No longer was it the fast moving army. Depravity points went up, and a lot of people like poo-pooed Nurgle. Fast forward a couple of months, and Nurgle has been one of the most dominant forces for the last 12 months. Like, it has been a very good book. Beasts of Chaos came out, and for anyone who maybe hasn't picked up the tome yet or hasn't actually got to play with it yet, the online sentiment has almost been exactly the same. People have been upset that the points increased. People have been upset that there's no summoning or very little summoning now. The primordial core points have changed. You have seen things just change a lot. The game, the way the army has played has changed. It's no longer about waves of trash. Talk to me about your journey, about reading this book, how you're thinking about it, and is it as bad as what the online perception on Twitter, on Facebook, on Discord is making Beast of Chaos feel like?
Yeah, and just to share, when you compared it to Nurgle, like that's really what I thought, or like comparing it to the old Celeste to the new Celeste, just that point hike, just very real and change the identity of the army completely. And I could completely understand people being negative because you go from this summon focus horde army to it's not that anymore. It's a very techy and borderline elitist, but not at the same time. We can dive deep into that later. But for me, as someone who's traveled to many events, I am so glad it's not Horde Army. When you've traveled to a bunch of events with essentially carrying two armies, I got very tired of it. And people in my club, Victoria's Secrets, I've complained about all the time with close personal friends. Just, I hate traveling with my army that's twice the size of everyone's, but then I have another army in my case, and my opponent's like, wait, what's all that over there? Oh, that's going to be the summons coming onto the field. They'll be like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. So, but then first impressions of the army is it's so different, and I'm someone that likes living in the unknown, and that's where we are right now. Just we're in the unknown, trying to figure out what's going to be those new foundations for those meta lists, competitive lists. So that's where my mind's right now. We're in discovery mode, and I'm excited for that.
It's been really interesting because I had the pleasure of playing against Beasts of Chaos, or the old version of that, even back in fantasy battles. And when I look at the new book today, it feels very much about the army that I used to know. It was never about having like a zombie-esque, like just hordes and hordes and hordes, and it's just this overwhelming horde that was just hitting your army. And it was always about the techie piece. It was always about some of the tricks. It was more consistent than, let's say, Gloomspite gets all the orcs and goblins back in the day. But very much, I did quite enjoy some of the new tricks, and we'll get into some of these and what's come up. But the overcompensation in the White Dwarf took the Battletome from bottom dwellers to top 12, like the top champions, in a matter of like months. I mean, even last month, the two biggest Age of Sigmar tournaments, CanCon and LVO, were won by Beasts of Chaos in the same week. So
Yeah.
a correction was coming, but also the change in the army has happened. And I think that's kind of where I did the preview video, and I tried to highlight, don't compare your old list to your new list. Look at this with fresh eyes and look at it to go, what can I build with my army? But I get that some people are upset because they now have 5,000 points of models they can't use, or they're not going to rotate as often. It's an interesting one, and I wanted to get your opinion. And is there anything else you'd add to just your perception? And is it as bad as what people have kind of initially read?
Yeah, to just ask, like, just the former strength of Beasts of Chaos being very high, completely true, and just to LVO showcase that, because there were 7 or 8 Beasts of Chaos players, and like 5 of us got 4-1 and better, obviously winning LVO too. So with that, that's already a pretty dang good army. And then if it's as bad as people say, no, it just plays completely different. You need a brand new mindset for it. You're throwing around debuffs, mortal wounds everywhere, and being very techy with your new heroic actions in the ambush.
Yeah, and I'll bring up the rules in a minute,
Yeah.
and we'll talk a bit about like how you're thinking about it. But when I looked at it, I thought there was a lot of glow ups, and I do want to get your hot take soon around Bestigors, because a lot of people are like, no, they're not Bestigor, they're Worstigors.
Yep.
But there's some good stuff in there. You know, I'm a fan of the Cygor. I think even if I wasn't running the new faction is Quakefray, I think there's some good stuff. Who's saying that Beasts of Chaos are bad? I think what a lot of people are saying is that their points basically went up significantly, and that has impacted their army. They feel like they get less for what they get on the table. They feel like they're being punished for the sins of the past, which was the White Dwarf giving you crazy rend by turn 3. And I won't argue that the probably the power level has been brought down a little, but also we need to acknowledge that you went from the bottom to the top very quickly, and maybe the White Dwarf was an overcorrection on the book. So you need to be brought in line just a little.
No, completely agree on that. It feels bad when all your stuff goes up, essentially almost like 30%, 40%. Some models it's essentially double. So yeah, it can feel very bad.
I get it. Like, I'm looking at my Loon Boss on Mangler Squig that went up 100 points, and I'm like, man, this Loon Boss on Mangler Squig is the same price as a Frost Lord, and it doesn't do nearly as much. I'm but the one thing that I've learned through Age of Sigmar as well is that good war scrolls can change points changes. When points are too expensive, they can be corrected easily. While a bad war scroll is a bad war scroll for a long time. And if you're a bad war scroll, it can take a whole edition or even a whole new battle tome, which could be a 2 to 3 year cycle. So I would much rather an improvement in a war scroll and the points tweak than actually having bad war scrolls flooding the board with trash and relying on White Dwarf updates. Just some initial thoughts.
Yeah, just thank goodness the Razor Gore is such a good war scroll that we can rely on that unit and fielding it so much. But all kidding aside, like, completely agree. Just points can be easily changed, and we can be expecting point changes with their usual quarterly updates and things like that.
Yeah,
So yeah, completely agree on that.
I won't disagree that the points probably were too expensive, and I hope whether it is in a month or even in the next General's Handbook or the next point iteration, we see some of those numbers come down a little because they are a little too high. But let's get into Beasts of Chaos and let's actually talk about some of the good stuff, because, even like OG Joel McGrath, who has been on the channel since day one, he was one of my OG Beast Lords in first edition talking about Beasts of Chaos. Very excited about the book, and he's very much a techie type person. So Talk to me about how you see this new book. Previously, and in Joel's words, actually, it was just flooding the boards with waves of trash. It was just crap after crap after crap. How does it play now? Talk to me about this book. Are they good at certain things? How do you win games? Like, get me the mindset of this new book.
Yeah, so far from my test games, it's really been utilizing one of our new glows in the rule set, the ambush mechanic, to kind of do a punch hard and then just sort of survive and use our tech and my horn attacked me. Just a goat life right there. Just goat problems, but then just use our tech and spread of mortal wounds to keep us in the game. And hopefully that initial punch was good enough, and applying debuffs so that we even out the field. Because at the end of the day, when we looking at war scrolls, they're not the most tankiest and survivable. We really rely on a lot of debuffs to kind of even out that field. But so far, that's been my play style with the new book. I've been liking it.
There's a lot of interesting tech that kind of complements it, from the Ungor Raiders being able to shoot off ambush. You've got heroic actions that allow you to issue or do things when your hero's off the board. You have Cygors who will punish wizards who successfully cast spells. And there's a lot of mortal wounds that come out on the charge. You know, your Doom Bulls, and I think your Bulgor do mortals on
Bulgors
the
as
charge.
well. Yeah.
Your Tuskor Chariot does mortals on the charge. Your Gors can strike last on the charge. Like, there's so much
Plenty of
tech.
artifacts too. Yeah, it's techy. And to bring all that, as you just described all that, one thing the book does great is the synergy really complements everything in this book. And I think that's probably one of the best things that they've done. Um, is everything feels like it pretty much synergizes so well with each other. And and it's also just the choice where almost everything has a place and a role in the book, that it's making hard decisions. Which command trait should I take? Which artifacts? Which spells should I be choosing? Just there's a use for almost everything there. So kudos on that for making choices hard.
Do you have any favorite units that have had a glow up, that whether you didn't run them often or now you're like, this unit definitely has to be in my list for whatever reason? You know, we in the past, you know, we loved the Shaggoth. We loved, obviously, you know, having the stabby unit next to the Bray Herd to get the primordial call. Like, you had some of those core consistents across the list. What are some of your favorite glow ups or
Yep.
units in the game?
Yeah, my favorite glow up has been the Cygor, and it was more just giving the Cygor a chance. Just it was in my LVO list, and just I didn't fully realize how powerful that monster reaction was, and especially for the local meta of devouring an endless spell to heal wounds. And with so many people taking endless spells, especially Purple Suns, just getting that extra dispel intent is very strong. But then in one of my games with the old Cygor, by the way, the Darius game player was too scared to cast spells with their Marathi because just the fear of taking a mortal wound. Just never cast a spell, not even a single attempt on Mind Razor. So now knowing that's just going to be a guaranteed chance if they successfully spell cast, just I just love it when a unit can tilt a player, and the Cygor can do that. Like them having to be conscious: do I want to cast this spell or take a mortal wound?
That's hot. Actually, I hadn't actually thought about that. Because as a Daughters of Cain player, especially early on, the less damage I can take, the longer I can have Marathi surviving. So in turn one, if you've got that Cygor within 30 inches of Little Marathi, and I've got 2 spell casts from Little Marathi, if I remember correctly, maybe 3, I can't
It's
remember. It might
3
be even a
now, but
3
2
caster.
unbinds.
If she's a 3 caster, and I mean, she gets a 6-up ward, right? But if she gets 3 spells off, that could be 3 mortal wounds, and you will remove her on the table, or you stop her from casting completely, which might be Mind Razor. It might be, you know, Steed of Shadows. There's a whole bunch of spells where it is going to really punish, you know, Tzeentch, Lumineth, anyone who has like 5-6 wound wizards, because it's going to really make them thinking about, or they're going to have to spend resources to heal them up throughout the game. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
why I would, if I was you, I would always have a Cygor in my list. I feel like in the current meta and Seraphon's coming down the line, even more reason to have a Cygor.
Yeah, right now it's been my Quake Play list has been my number one tested list with several games under my belt with it, and yeah, just that ability alone makes me want to take it, and it keeping its Devour Monstrous Rampage as well, and that one kind of trend you were just talking about is kind of like the risk or reward. Oh, do I take this spellcast or do I take a more wound? That's kind of a theme that comes up to like with the cockatrice, just essentially on a 4 enemy you can only hit on 6s. That gets the opponent thinking, do I even want to attempt that, or do I have to invest in resources to essentially kill those 8 wounds? But there's multiple themes like that where the opponent needs to weigh the risk and reward from our own mechanics too. So I find that very cool.
Any other? I'm going to bring up the rules in a minute, but is there any other units that you'd want to call out as absolute? Actually, before I move on, good question
Hmm.
from Gan here. Have you found the prayers useful? So we're kind of jumping ahead slightly here, but in the Quake Fray subfaction, which is one of the new subfactions, your Cygors become priests only in
Yep.
that subfaction, and there's a sweet prayer that does some damage around an objective. Have you
Yeah.
found it useful?
It would have been useful many times if I remembered it that's a priest. So that's my number one hurdle. Even if it wasn't a priest, I would still be taking it, and I just need to remember it more. I did get a nasty Earth Shatter, I believe is the prayer. It has a 3 answer value. Just those mortal wounds popped off, did about 7. So just 7 free mortal wounds in the hero phase. I'll gladly take that, and usually been running curse on it, but mostly I just need to remember that it's a priest and can use prayers. So
I don't blame you. Obviously, it's recently gained priest under Quake Free. But is there any other units that you really like? Like I'm going to call it out. I love Tuskor chariots because I always looked at like the Chaos chariots. I'm like, man, I wish they had something similar. I thought that's a solid glow up. And controversial or not, I think Slangor are definitely in the best position that they have been all game. Like if Slangor aren't good now, I don't know if they're ever going to be good.
yeah, for my next unit pick, it would be the Chaos Gargant for the same price as a Beast Lord. Just it's essentially a mini Purple Sun that just looks like a big target for someone to nail at. When I more put that together, it's like, should I take a Beast Lord or a Chaos Gargant? It's been Chaos Gargant every time. Just yeah, them being the same price point for 145, it's sort of a steal, but yeah, you take it for its aura ability. I would never rely on its damage or survivability, but that aura ability is very good.
No, if you want damage, you're going Bulgur. You're not
Oh yeah,
going. You're not going. I mean, it's a good little tech piece, but and I think that's the great thing about it is there's so many little great pieces. It's about how does it all come together. So let's actually make it all come together with the rules. So first things first, we've got our. I guess we'll go with our beast herd ambush, right? So the big change here with the Beast Herd ambush is that in the past you would only be able to ambush in turn 1. Now you've got the option of doing turn 1 and turn 2. So talk to me a little bit about the Beast Herd ambush. Do you like it? How do you use it? What are good types of units, or what are some considerations on how and when you would use the ambush?
yeah. Ambush, I love it. It's been nothing but a glow up for this ability, and us being able to now have choice to come on turn 2 really helps with some double turn protection or protection for shooting armies, which could sometimes be um, our weakness. But the combination that I've been liking is Bulgors coming out of ambush just with their bonus to charge and them doing so many mortal wounds, essentially a mortal wound per model in the unit. You're always getting 5 or 6 mortal wounds on the charge, which is so nice. And then combine that with a Doom Bull with the Helm artifact, the Slither Rack Helm,
The
but yeah, but the tech combination is horns attacking me again. Sorry. Um, is using the Doom Bull's command ability to kind of have it be a failsafe or a chance to apply a life strikes last debuff on the enemy unit. So say if you fail a charge, just we're relying on 7. It can happen even with a reroll. Sometimes just having the Doom Bolt there to just for the scary presence, like come charge me, but he's going to charge in your combat phase and will most likely apply the strike last debuff, giving it some needed protection for really relying on the 7 to charge in this book, or using the Doom Bolt himself to give you that third chance to charge with those Bulgors.
So let me just break that down for a second for people who may not be as intimate with the rules. So your Bulgor get a native +1 to the charge from the musician, which is cool. And the unit, when you set them up in reserve, when you bring them out for the first time, they get +1 to the charge. So we are currently from a 9-inch charge to a 7-inch charge. Obviously, you could use a reroll to the charge with a command point. Then when you look at the command ability from the Doom Bull, it says you can use this command ability at the start of the combat phase. You can issue it within 12 inches of a to a Warherd unit, as long as they're outside of 3, and then they can make a charge. So you come in from ambush, you charge. If you fail it, you could burn a CP to re-roll that. And if you still fail it, you could then do again. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to use all-out attack, but I would rather that than fail the charge completely. And you've got an even better chance. So three attempts on a 7-inch charge, you should statistically hit it every time, or almost every time, unless the dice gods hate you.
Yeah, which it can happen. And just another theme, just like I feel like that there's just a lot of themes in this list, is this book is swingy, but like where the risk is worth the reward. Just if we go for it, that reward is nice. But failing it, it's not at the end of the day. We do have still some answers. So I would say don't be scared of taking that 7-inch charge. We have some fail safes for it, and the risk is worth the reward.
And Eat, Pray, Love also calling it out. There is again opening Christmas presents a little early. There is a command trait called Bestial Cunning that allows you to do a 7-inch deployment. So you'd come in from 7 inches from an enemy, add 2 to 5. You should hit a 5 with a reroll.
Yeah,
like, you should.
Yeah, and the biggest thing with that, it's anywhere on the table, not even from the board edge. So can get some sneaky Bulgors up in there.
Outside of your Bulgor, who else or what else are good units to consider for ambush? Or is there reasons on the battlefield? Because I guess that's one of the challenges, right? If you're someone who's new to ambush mechanics, it's hard to know how many units do I put on the table or how many put into reserve. When do I bring them in? Turn 1, turn 2? What are like my triggers to bring them onto the table?
Yeah, for me personally, I haven't done too much playtesting with those other units of trying to ambush, because the Bulgors have been just performing so well in that role. But I would say anything that has another bonus charge from, say, their musician, or just applying some effect from the charge, makes the most sense. But then using it defensively to, say, double turn protection, if you know that they're just Iron Jaws coming at you, or a KO that's just going to be shooting you, by no means should you really actually deploy. You're probably going to be going more for a null deployment than that scenario, most likely. That would be my advice.
That's a great
with
call.
that.
The other one is where are the objectives on the table? Could you bring a unit onto an objective and cap it from coming in from ambush? And there are some battle plans where the objective is being able to be stolen from the side of the board. So
Yeah,
definitely a consideration, because you're right. Shooty armies that might get you turn 1, great choice. Someone who could charge you in turn 1, great choice. Because they've rushed up the board, or they have wasted a charge, and then you come in from the backfield, or you get into that juicy center.
yeah, exactly. And the battle plan is going to dictate a lot of that too, as well.
Cool. Yeah, I just want to get a couple of call outs on how you think about the ambush, and the fact that now it's turn 1, turn 2 is awesome. Turn 1, I was like,
Yeah.
I'll give you turn 1, because normally I'd be low drops. You have turn 1, I force your drop, and there's no threat to me. But now it's like, well, I can still keep cards up my sleeve for turn 2.
Yeah, all before, like, it being turn 1 was just like, it was more of a threat. Like, all right, I'm making you since I have the rule, I'm making you deploy to cover your back line, but I'm probably not going to use it since I don't gain much from it. But now we gain a lot from it, and it's round 2, so it's them keeping them back even most likely further, knowing that we can have some real punches coming from ambush now
Yeah.
too. So they gotta respect it.
Yeah. You have your Masters of the Wilderness. So in your hero phase, if your general's in reserve, you still receive a command point. So normally you wouldn't receive a command point, and it's actually hindered some of my Stormcast armies in the past where I've wanted to put my general in reserve, but I lose the CP. So it changes my general ability, but you don't have to worry about that. So you're getting that extra CP, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, shame it's only in our own hero phase, because I do find Beast of Chaos still is very command point hungry army, but it's very nice that we get it. So we could have not had the rule, so I'll take what we get from that.
Some is better than none.
Yep.
Some is better than none. Then we have these rituals of ruin. So I'm gonna not do story time with Coach. I'm gonna assume everyone can read it, or if you're listening to this later on the podcast, you've got your book in front of you. But give me your take of the rituals of ruin, and how do you think about it? Do you go for the double, because you can obviously do 2 different versions and there's lots of different options? What's your high level first?
Well, I want to say bold assumption that you think I can read when I come dressing like this, and having horn malfunctions too. But no, Ritual of Ruins, which essentially pretty much replaced our own cut ourself mechanic, where before summoning we used to cut ourselves with D3 mortals on either a hero or a unit, and we would gain summoning points. But now it's doing special heroic actions, and it's really cool. 2 big winners for me is Warping Curse and Blood Taunt. Brand of Wild and Alpha Beast Instincts. More situationals, and is sometimes just tough to pull off since they don't last till your next hero phase. It's only till the end of the turn. But Warping Curse for just D6 mortals from 12 inches from the hero, or from the edge if you're ambushing with that hero, or Blood Taunt just pulling them in a direction of 2d6 inches. Amazing. Just you can throw a lot of people off, and it's very hard to just deploying against like something knowing that you can get pulled 2d6 in any direction. Like it's tough to just kind of predict that and what that's going to look like. Probably the best game I saw was just versus Nurgle, just pulling a Glotkin towards the corner of the table, and they couldn't charge till like the end of round 3. Just it was spicy.
So maybe there's a couple of things to call out here. So first off, with the first paragraph, you can do this, and I hate the fact that this is called a heroic action, because it's not a heroic action.
Yeah, it's very
Despite
confusing.
it's stupidly confusing, right? So this does not stop you from doing finest hour, heroic leadership, heroic recovery. You can do these rituals of ruin in addition to those. So I think some people would read this initially and just immediately think, oh, like other factions, you've just gained a couple of extra heroic actions. No, it's separate. Now, if you use those, let's say the first paragraph, your beast lord, or whoever's issuing the ritual of ruin, will take D3 mortal wounds that can't be negated, or if they're within 3 inches of a beast of chaos unit, they can basically pass on those wounds. Again, they can't be negated, so no ward saves. Before I get into the second paragraph, do you think about that very similarly to how we used to do the primordial core, where you'd have that unit of gore or ungore or something you could stabby to take damage on behalf of the hero? And what is a good unit to be able to pass those wounds off to?
Yeah, most ideally is a unit that has some type of passive healing. So that's like either if we're getting to all herd them like gores, ungores, or ungore rares, just regenerating units. That would be an awesome choice. Or a Gorgon, because knowing throughout the game that if you're Quakeflame, maybe a Cygor with the heal prayer, something that has some passive regeneration or just some regeneration opportunity. But I've honestly not been scared to just do take D3 on the Bray Shaman or take D3 on the Doom Bowl. Obviously, very different game if I'm facing, say, Seraphon, where I know they could just global me with Mortal Wounds. So it's gonna be depending on what's the opponent. Or yes, the Razor Gore. That's actually probably the best model to do, and we should all be taking 5 of them just for this. Yeah.
Brian putting out the hot take already. Take Razor Gores. But like yeah, like keep that in mind. So you know, if you want to keep your hero around longer, make sure they're within 3 inches of a beast of chaos. So it could open you up to a spawn. It could up to you literally anything. So a good call out with something that auto heals. Then in addition, you can carry out this again with a hero that is off the board. So if they're in reserve, unfortunately, they won't be within 3 inches of another unit, so that model is going to take damage. So you can tap into this twice, which I think is awesome when you consider, as you said, pulling a unit off an objective, bringing them closer to you for combat to make the charge easier. You could do, like, there's so many great options that throughout the game you can pull from. So love both of these.
Yeah, definitely just the blood taunt off the table, or just the threat of doing D6 mortals. Like, just, a lot, obviously people are taking Galatian champions because half the battle tactics require them, and most likely they're gonna be 6 wounds and less. That can snipe one of them. So that's a scary moment for them.
And if you've got like Ungor Raiders who have a once per game shooting off the table, you could combine that with Warping Curse. So if you still don't kill that hero, it's got 1 wound left, you could chip away with it with an Ungor Raider unit, with that just picking the point on the battlefield from the edge, shoot. They should be able to do 1 or 2 damage. Boom, between Warping Curse, it's gone. So, and you know what? Even Alpha Instinct being able to not take battle shock tests, and I know, as a Gits player, a lot of people are freaking out about Gits right now, and they're talking about the horror gas because of its ability to shut down inspiring presence and things like that. Well, Alpha Instinct could be a great way if horror gas is around the table and you want to run lots of herd, you could get some battle shock immunity as well.
Yeah, for my gripe, it's just it only lasts to the end of that turn. I'm really trying to think of how many times that I had to, say, use Inspiring Presence on my own turn, because usually if it's my turn, I knew a unit's going to be taking damage, I'm most likely retreating them, like, to prevent that damage. Why take extra damage? But I am sure it'll come into play sometime. Just, I have a gripe that it's only till the end of this turn. Ugh.
Sure, but that's like heroic actions in general, right? And maybe making a unit battle shock immunity for the full battle round might be a little bit too oppressive. But it's a great way to potentially fail safe getting around it if the situation might occur, or you throw in a bunch of gore, you're going to strike last, and you know they're going to take a lot of damage, but you want them to survive and regen. It could be an option.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of options, we have our command traits, and there are 6 command traits to choose from. We've already alluded to Bestial Cunning, which is one of my personal favorites because it's like the Lord Imperatant in Stormcast, where instead of coming in from 9 inches or 9 inches from an enemy, you could now set up a unit outside of 7. So that makes that charge just that little bit easier. But what are your command traits? What do you like, and who are good options to be the general?
So my choice has been Twist Raid Curse Beast. Just, I love running endless spells in my list, and that with a Zangor Shaman or a Bray Shaman with a combination of Arcane Tome. Just now you get this either Zangor Shaman being a 2, potentially 3 cast wizard with bonuses, or Bray Shaman with Arcane Tome being a 2 cast wizard. And now the casting is reliable, and we'll see our spells are damn good in this book. And just now having reliable casting, makes a world of difference in this. My next pick is Slake Fray Reveler. Just, we lost a lot of movement. We really rely on ambush to get our units where we want them to go. And if you don't have that, you can find yourself, your opponent kiting you or just avoiding you for the game, and it's very tough to catch up. But that solves the issue. It gained +3 movement if you're just within 6 inches of terrain feature. Again, it's just within, not wholly within.
Mm.
Most tables are going to have 8 pieces of terrain at events, so that's going to be easy to get, and that combines well with chariots. Gain 13-inch move chariots, just you're that's almost turn one alpha striking with some very nasty charge rolls, doing a lot of mortal wounds, since the chariots just do a lot more wounds based off their roll. So that's nice.
Yeah, that's a really good call out. Actually, I think for me, bestial cunning, especially if I am going to be, as you know, Eat, Pray, Love talked about, having that unit of 6 or 9 Bulgor, for example, and I really want to double down and hit that opponent hard. I think
Yeah.
bestial cunning is the one that stands out. But as you said, Twist Fray Cursed Beast is so good because as the game progresses, turn 3, I'm getting +3 to the cast. Turn 4, I'm getting +4 to the cast. And as you've mentioned, and we'll get to very shortly, there are some really good spells, and that's not even talking about endless spells.
And what does the opponent think when it's round 5? You have a Zangor Shaman with this once per game, cast another spell at +3, telling them that it's a +8. I just want that opportunity to happen. Just watch the life leave their eyes. Like, what? It's a +8?
Bray Love talking about some crack sides list tech. If you wait until round 5 to cast your blow, with your Zangor Shaman bonus spell with the Twist Fray Curse Beast while on arcane terrain and have a bonded incarnate, you get +10 to the cast.
Watch out in the gash and Teclis.
The best I've ever had is like a +8 with my Hallowheart army, but I was rudely interrupted by a Corden player who rolled a natural 8 on my spellcast and just auto unbind. So I'm like, look, props to you for rolling an 8. But I think the 3 that you call that are solid choices. Propagator of Ruin, I'm not a massive fan of. Rotfrey Plague Pelt, it's okay. Even the Skullfrey Gornhorn is all right. But I think the 3 that you chose would probably be my top 3, depending on who's my general, what am I trying to achieve, and what's in the list.
Yeah, and I see, viability in almost all of them. Probably the biggest loser being Rotfrey, Plague Belt. But it's just depending on how you build your list. Like, if you're building a lot of just Brayherd models with your list, Skullfrey, Greyhorn, it is going to be a good option then. For that too. And then Bestial Cunning, like I would take that more if I was running 2 units of Bulgors in my army. Just, one, maybe one with shields for that charge, but then if they ever fail, they have some survivability, and then waiting for that second round where things get moved and you can put that unit in a very good spot for them to charge, target that high quality piece unit in the opponent's army. It's going to be
Yeah,
very good.
I agree, and that's the beauty of this book is there's so much list tech and so much variety that just find something that's going to work for you. And hey, you've still got Master of Magic, you've still got the universal stuff, but there are some good choices, which leads me to your artifact choices. And again, I'd have to say there's a couple of good choices here. So, of your artifact choices, which are the ones that stand out for you, and do you have any preferred combinations on who you allocate your artifact to?
Yeah, so we're still a summoning army. We got Brave Blast Trumpet. We can check that box out. Can we summon? Yes, we're a summoning army. But no, that's powerful, especially for just summoning gores. Just that's essentially just I can put a unit that has a potential to apply strikes less. Because if you don't know, gores, if they have more models in the unit and they complete a charge on a 3-up, that enemy unit gets the strike last debuff. Very handy too, and with a book that um lacks on just having models on the field now, just one unit can be a game changer for that too.
Could be a
My
cheap screen. It could be an objective capture. It could be, as you said, to soak up an unleash hell or a charge and go for the strike last. There's a lot of utility from that, and I think I will call out that even though if you roll a 1, often sometimes artifacts have a failure point. You still get the unit. It's just it comes on a
Yeah,
turn later, so it's not so bad.
yeah, completely agree on that. My personal favorite has been the Bleeding Gnarl staff. Just it is a great source that a lot of mortal wounds will just pop off, just not really using it on objective but more terrain features. You just gotta be within 6 inches of it, and it's enemy units within 6 inches of that terrain feature. Just that's a very large radius when we're talking about terrain. Um, and can be catastrophic when you apply that with like say a Zangor shaman that can really get to anywhere on the table with its movement range too, and works well with their ambush since it happens at the end of the movement phase. So ambush, get within 6 of that terrain, and just start watching more wounds fly as well. And then Slither Rack Helm, great. I would use it more for a defensive option for ambushing Bulgors, combining that with the Doom Bowl, because that's how that Doom Bowl is going to give you that failsafe. Oh, I failed the charge with these Bulgors. Let me keep him behind and wait for the opponent to charge me so I can apply a strikes last with my command ability that allows me to charge in their combat phase. And that changes everything because, as everyone knows, Bulgors slap with a lot of mortal wounds, especially in galley bets.
Talk to me about the Axe of Morgo, because on paper it looks great. And I think when people think about it, go, "Ooh, they can't make a ward save. That sounds really good." But then when you think about the practical element and how you use it on the table, I think it might be a trap, or it certainly isn't as attractive as it initially seems. Talk to me. How do you look at the axe?
On paper, you're going to be probably looking next to the point cost that you'll probably use it on a Shaggoth. That should deter you away, but yeah, our heroes are mostly there for support. They're never really combat focused, and usually they're going to be dying if they're within 3 inches if you're not applying some sort of debuff with Fight Last or the cockatrices make them fight on sixes, the gibbering chaos spawn that does -1 attack. Just our heroes can't really stand on their own. The only one that could is the Shaggoth, but you're paying a hefty price point for. I would say there's probably gonna be better value. Well, there will be better value. That point cost is just damn too high, 275.
Yeah, I mean, you could put it on a Doom Bull. That's probably your most slappy hero, but it's probably better artifacts. Like this Slitherrack Helm, for example, might be a little bit better than. I mean, if I have like a third artifact choice, maybe the axe, but maybe I go Arcane Tome.
Yeah, and obviously there's many armies that won't be utilizing ward or that good of a ward save too.
Good,
While
good call out as well.
the
Gan
Slitherrack,
mentioning the Nurgle Demon Prince. You could get that, and it's natively built into the Demon Prince as opposed to using one of your artifact selections.
yeah, yeah. Well, our other artifacts are gonna have utility and use in every matchup. While Exomorgor is not, that's not gonna be the case.
No, cool. No, that's good. You got a whole bunch of spells, so many spells. So let's start with your Brayherd spells. How many spells do you take, or do you have any ones that really stand out to you? Like these are the must spells in my list first.
Yeah, so far for me, it's been a tie between Vicious Stranglethorn and the Wild Rampage, and then Tendrils of Atrophy has been always my must. Just that's essentially saying that, like, hey, Beast of Chaos, I'm gonna take off my horns.
Yeah,
They are
yeah.
interrupting me. It's
I was gonna
like
say, like when you do look at it, and I'll delay for a second, but
I still got horns.
tendrils for me is just incredible. I
It's
love the fact that add +1 to the damage inflicted until your next hero phase with melee, right? That's what you want to do. You want to get in combat, you want to slap.
mhm.
And if you want your Doom Ball to slap, for example, you want to get yeah, I mean, unfortunately he doesn't do as much in combat. He's too swingy, you're right. That's where the command ability, good call out, Eat, Pray, Love.
Yeah, it's almost like we didn't lose bounty hunters, like when you apply that on a unit, which +1 to damage just racks up. And so it's always been such a good feeling. It makes units like, say, Gores, which aren't always the best in combat, to actually being a threat. Just makes a unit that's not normally a threat now a threat. So that's been my favorite. Then Vicious Stranglethorns, combination with that, with now a new rise, the Gorgon. Thank goodness it's actually pretty viable now, especially with this spell. Just the Gorgon can use its wall ability to pick units to interrupt coherency. Then Vicious Stranglethorn can make sure they can't pile in to get back in coherency. So now at the end of the turn, they're going to be removing models.
I just want to call out with the tendrils as well. Like anywhere that you can get a volume of attacks, and Ibre love calling out the Gelato veteran, Galatian veteran Zangor, who have a lot of attacks, getting +1 to the damage using tendrils. Great ability, and the Zangor are so good in this book. Hell, put it on your Slangor and get the strike. Go for the once per game double attack, and again, you can get really good value out of tendrils.
Yeah, +1 damage has never been a like, does this unit really need +1 damage? No one has said that. Everyone will take +1 damage on anything.
Well, it just makes up for the fact that your armor saves aren't the strongest. You are a bit of a glass cannon at times, so being able to do
Mhm.
more damage means there's less damage coming at you. So even the more reason why you want to get, let's say, was it the Twist Fray Cursed Beast, to get that spell off, even in a Lumineth, Seraphon,
Yeah.
Zench type meta, you can still slap. That'll delete those pink horrors in no time.
Yeah, that's why I run it, just because I'm thinking about those matchups where there's plenty of armies that just have some bonus to cast, and we usually were an army that never had it. Now we're on more equal footing with them to try to squeeze something out, too. So
Would you take something like Titanic Fury to boost up your Gorgon or your Cygor at all?
I wouldn't. I feel like that's investing quite a bit for units that it's funny with the Gorgon, you're not really taking it for its combat attacks, more for the swallow ability. And then the Cygor has a great combat profile, but is it worth going from 7 to 8 attacks? Eh, no, to invest in the spell. I would rather just take Vicious Stranglethorn to try to help keep them alive so they can't pile in and get in as many attacks, to take that utility than something like Titanic Fury. I know there's combinations with it looks good on the Chimera, but I feel like the Cygor and the Gorgon and Chaos Gargant are 3 monsters that are overshadowing the rest right now, and for good reason, with it being the point cost or being swingy, or they need a hero to babysit them. It's just a lot to invest in, my opinion. So
You know, I was just thinking with Titanic Fury, because the Quake Fray sub faction does allow you to take Cygor or Gorgon as battle line. So if you
yeah.
were going to invest in, let's say, 3 Gorgons or 3 Cygors or some combination of the three, would you be beneficial to go Titanic Fury to then make them even better, knowing so many points are invested into your monster battle line? So it's a consideration. But I'm hearing from you, maybe not as good as some of the other spell choices.
Yeah, for me right now, my eyes are on other spells right now. But it's a new book, it's a new goat world out there, and I could be wrong. And I think for the most part, everyone needs to know we could just be wrong with our initial perception of things. Something new can come out, a list can go 5-0 and blow our minds.
Well, I think we've got to remember, Brian, that we're in a new season where we've gone from
Yeah,
Galatian veterans to Galatian champions. So the
yeah,
value and the tournament packs and what missions we play, and obviously we've got new battle tomes coming. We can only assume it's going to be what Seraphon, Slanesh,
hmm,
Korn, KO, what Dawnbringers bring to the party. So the value of units are going to up and down depending on how the meta kind of settles. So
yeah.
talk to me about Thunderscorn. So you've got actually, I was surprised how many good Thunderscorn spells there were. If you asked me to pick one, I actually struggle. I actually think there's a couple of good options here.
Yeah, like each one just has a place that you can find great value in. I am surprised Hailstorm stayed the same too. So that just the utility um piece of debuffing a unit to just have move, run, and charge is so great. But to combine that with Natrax Jaws, that endless spell, just roll 3d6 and take the difference of that 3d6 to imply mortal wounds based off their movement characteristic. That's big value there. And then one thing surprised with that, it's a full spell lore. It's no longer 3. We actually got 2 additional ones too. But the only problem is, and we'll get to it, but spoiler, Shaggoth is a lot of points to just get one of these spells off, and That's the big bummer, spending 275 points for a single cast wizard with no bonuses. That's a little
He's a
gut
tanky.
punch.
He's a tanky hero, but it is a hard trade when you have, again, a lot of your army has gone up. It seems like the unit that everyone wants to put in their list, but when they realize they're over their points or they're close to their points, they're like, "Yeah, you got to go."
Yeah, it's tough, especially for Garrus Blades. Just the range being 18 and only casting value 6. That means you're pretty much casting anywhere and just make a unit um, subtract 1 from their attacks. Like, that is good. And then Ferocious Gale, essentially the same thing, but it's aura based for missile weapons. That's great too. Thunderwave and Raging Storm, it's meh, but if you're building a list where you're trying to stack a ton of mortal wounds, then we could be thinking about it. But at the end of
I,
the day, that point cost.
Yeah, look, I think there's some good options depending on how the meta goes if you take a Thunderscorn Wizard. I think currently maybe what I'd be thinking about is something like Furious Gale, maybe, knowing that if you were trying to go well at a tournament, you've obviously got Lumineth, Daughters of Cain. If KO comes down the line, in the next couple of months, if you've got Cities of Sigmar, which is, again, a shooty army, depending on where the meta's at, I think Furious Gale's not a bad option, but let's see where shooting is at currently with all these Galatian champions and sharpshooters, and maybe the value decreases a little, or maybe they go for volume and lots of one attacks, because then that chips away at the bodies protecting the champions. But there are some good options, but as you've mentioned, the price on a Shaggoth is a little bit too high.
Yeah.
Just a little too high. While we transition, friend of the channel, Mason, asking, why do you think Beast of Chaos didn't get any new units for the army, only new sculpts for a tiny hero?
Well, Mason, as someone I completely do not know, I think it's because he didn't come to LVO this year, and it was retaliation because of you missing out. No, you know, I don't know. Games Workshop can just take a long time to update stuff.
I'll be honest, I was actually surprised how many units you kept. Like, if I thought about like the book and what people thought, they thought Centaur were going to go, they thought Chaos Warhounds were going to go, they thought Razor Gore were going to go. There was like a good list of 5 units they thought weren't going to make the new book. But I will ask you at the end of the show as well what new unit you would have added if you had the choice. But before we get to that, you've got your great phrase. And as I previously mentioned, there is a new sub-faction called the Quake Fray. I mentioned earlier the Gorgon and the Cygor become battle line, which is really cool. And your Cygor become priests, and they know a prayer called Earth Shatterer, which casting or chanting value of 3, range 12. You pick an objective within range, and each unit within 6 inches takes D3 mortal wounds. And then until your next hero phase, when determining the models, the enemy would round down, or so they'd halve the amount of models counting against the objective, rounding down. So no effect on Beast of Chaos with that particular thing, but talk to me.
Yeah, at first I want to say it feels good not having a sub-faction tax anymore. Just being able to choose our own command trait, artifacts, just it's a wonderful world. Finally updated with the other books too. All Heard, Game Spawn, Quake Fray, my favorites, especially Quake Fray, just especially coming from a game with a close game from LVO versus Fire Slayers. Man, I wish I had a priest to get rid of an invocation. So I am like coming from that bias right now. Like, I could have lost that game.
You could shut down the Daughters of Cain, Heart of Fury. You could shut down
Yeah.
the Fire Slayer's grand strategy of having up the Infernoth. I'm going to say this right now, and maybe you disagree. I am so disappointed on the Gave Spawn. The Gave Spawn does give you a cool new unit, which is the Morgurite Spawn, which is a set of 3, I guess, more consistent Chaos Spawns. But that's all they get. I feel like there could have been something more, like if your general dies, it turns into a spawn. I feel like it's like half cooked. Go back in the oven for a little longer.
Yeah, I would tend to agree and combine that with Dark Walkers. Like, feel like it's just missing more because Dark Walkers used to be you could ambush with any unit and you would have like a similar command trait, but it was a little bit worse because you had to wait a whole turn to redeploy this unit. But now that redeploy does come on the same turn, so that's great. But it's only for Gores, Ungors, and Ungor Raiders. I wish if they kept that with everything, oh, that would be a winner right there. But I get what you mean with the Chaos Spawns. For me, they're gain 3d6 shooting attacks at red 1, damage 2. That's no joke. They gotta respect it. You're kind of paying 230 points for 15 wounds that your opponent does need to be conscious about now. But where I have trouble in my list building with Game Spawn and is they don't really fulfill any role. Like they're not a screen, they're not a hammer, they're kind of just a addition, while a cockatrice and a chariot all have utility, but you could perform them as screens. Like I've used cockatrices as screens all the time. That base size is good enough. But the Chaos Spawn is not that. And so now you're just loading 230 points as something that's not really fulfilling a role that you're taking for a debuff and a shoot attack mostly.
Ma-
So they're tough.
Make no mistake, I'm not saying that Gave Spawn, folks, is bad. I'm not saying it's bad. I feel like that I'm going to choose my whole sub faction on the Gave Spawn, I should go a little bit more. Quake Frey gives me a priest and a sweet battle line. This gives me just 3 spawn as a set battle line. That's it. So I feel like there's a little bit more that should have happened, whether it's something that's, I don't know, a command trait or something that you got a little bit extra with the Gave Spawn, because it's just, I don't know. To me, All Herd is probably the number one.
Yeah.
Quake Frey and Dark Walker's a second, depending on what you're choosing and how you like your army. But I think this particular one for me, All Herd is a clear winner.
Yeah, All Herd it solves the issue that the army has of who's taking the D3 mortal wounds, where you're using ritual heroic actions. But then also makes a unit tankier as well, knowing that they're just gonna come back each round too, and especially with Gores with shields now gain a natural 4-up save. That's a world of difference right there.
Yeah,
Too.
that means you can spend a resource and get them down to, ignore Ren 1, or, get them to a 3-up save. That's very tasty. And obviously that's true with a lot of things. Like I think the Bulgors, if you take your Bulgor with shield and hand weapon, that got a characteristic improvement as opposed to a +1. I like that change.
Yeah. Dark Waters, like the most techie thing I've seen from friends that have tested is combining with a lot of strikes last, with specifically just Ungors. So you apply strike last to your unit. Ungors can just retreat from combat because they're just cowards now. The best trait of any unit, being a coward. Just retreat from combat instead of fighting. And then they just next turn teleport away and just keep avoiding fights. That's been the
Yeah.
most unique combination I've seen with Dark Walker. So at the end of the day, I'm going to stick by the thing of if your list is being built for it, it's probably going to be good in Beasts of Chaos. Just if you're building towards a specific theme, you're going to have a fighting chance. And that's just a great feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. No, look, it's good options. I think it's just some clear winners. Absolutely here.
Mm-hmm.
You also have some battle tactics and some grand strategies. If I remember correctly, you previously from the White Dwarf, you just had Protect the Herdstone. You got
That's
one.
correct.
Yeah, so you've got 3 extra grand strats to choose from. Where do you stand with I guess the one that is Protect the Herdstone a good one, or do you like some of the new ones?
For me, when I was taking Protect the Herdstone, it was more to bait my opponent to come at me, because they can start seeing red in their eyes and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna deny his grand strategy early." But then they would just get trapped in the tar pit of bodies of Beasts of Chaos and ruin their play. But now, since the Herdstone actually isn't as viable or important in the army, I would say don't waste your time on it. Duskrane Brayherd, that's a pretty good one. It's pretty easy to have 2 units on the field on objectives that you control at the end of the game. So that's been my winner. The Age of Beasts, if I was building more of a list where I was spamming Cygors or Gorgons, could have use. Flanking Warherd just kind of seems a little bit hard. to do. I haven't done much playtesting with that one, but for me, getting Bulgors to live to the end of the game, and let alone having 2 or more of them, I would have to be investing heavy in that.
Yeah, like I'm looking at the Age of the Beast, and that seems ridiculously hard to do. I don't know if that's the one that I
Yeah,
would do ever.
yeah, your Sagors would need to have heal Gorgons being key fights, knowing that they're going to be regenerating more life than losing. That's a real tough one.
So what would be the one that you'd recommend?
Oh,
Is it Protect the Herdstone?
no, Desecrating Brayherd would be
Sorry,
mine.
this. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
2 or more objectives, and they're
Most of our
contested by
lists,
Greyherd.
yeah, most of our lists are gonna have Brayherd, and really, if by the end of the game you're not controlling more objectives than your opponents, like you're probably losing the game anyways. So that's just my thought process on it.
I know Ibray loved mentioning that Protect the Herdstone is an obvious one for them because you put the Herdstone in the corner since, and this is a change that happened in the
Yeah,
White Dwarf where you used to have an aura that would pulse and grow over time. Now you can just put the Herdstone in the corner. You don't need to have units sacrificing the Herdstone as well, so you don't need it as interactive as you used to have, and making it really hard for your opponent to get into the corner, smash into rubble. And if they did, that's a lot of resources to get to the corner to destroy it.
well,
So, and that's obviously keeping them out of the fight.
well, so it's that or just being within 9 inches of the Herdstone, which in the game, that's usually pretty easy for the opponent to sacrifice 1 unit. That's just my take on it. That's been kind of the bane of Protect the Hearthstone is no enemy units within 9 inches, and us not having summoning at a lower body count. It's kind of hard to prevent that, I would say, but I haven't done playtesting on it, so
It depends on your build, right? Ultimately,
yeah. Yeah,
if you're
ultimately.
putting a lot of points into your Bulgur, for example, then you don't have enough points. But if you're going all herd and you're regenerating and you got lots of bodies,
Hmm.
2 good options either way.
I see
And
that.
what about your battle tactics?
Battle tactics are definitely great. It's nice. Bestial Wrath can happen on the second turn now, but it's a shame that the unit can't be destroyed by the end of it. So make sure your Bulgors don't kill the unit, which that's gonna
That
be a tall order to ask.
it's counterintuitive. Like if there's a really good anvil that your opponent you want to smash them but not completely destroy them, let's say a tanked up unit, great. Burning question before we continue into battle tactics. I asked the same question on the Gits show yesterday. So in the current season, in season 2, our easy turn 1 battle tactic against the odds is no longer there.
Yeah,
So is there a good turn 1 option here, or are we looking for something from the General's Handbook like Desecrate Their Lands?
a good turn one option would be um, if you're going first or second in that battle round, right? And um, the first one, there's not unless if you're building a list around Beast of Wrath or Trample to Mulch, there's not really an option, and Trample to Mulch is kind of playing risky, just probably taking chariots or multiple units of Bulgors at the same unit. That's a lot of charge rolls you gotta make then too. Those would be the 2 options.
I
Aid the
imagine
Aid the Wilderness. I was gonna get into that. It it just depends on the terrain and then also the funkiness of if you're the rule book says if you're behind terrain, you're considered in cover, but then that's always been the perception of you're being targeted by someone. So how do we play that if you're not a target? Like it's just being behind the wall wholly. That's where I'm cautious to do that and start potential argument with my opponent because at the end of the day, want us both in good fights and just depends on terrain. If Aid the
I,
Wilderness is gonna be good.
I was going to call out Aid of Wilderness depending on the terrain setup, how generous the size of the terrain is. I think if in doubt, you in your pre-game discussion define where the terrain is, especially because a lot of terrain isn't based. So, what is the footprint? If you got like an Azurite ruin, what is the actual footprint of terrain? And if it is generous and you do have some small units that can come on the side of the battlefield and can set up within those terrain features, it's a good option. But it's definitely a situational option turn 1.
Yeah. So I think at the end, It just depends on what the battlefield, what your opponent and your list is. If you have a turn one option, some lists, usually my list, aren't going to really have those obvious choices. But someone who's going chariots or a way that they're really using ambush to get the wilderness, then yeah, it does there. If your list builds for it, it would work.
Yeah, I dig it. I dig it. Talk to me about the Herdstone, and then we're going to get into list folks, and we can kind of understand a little bit about how Brian's thinking about Beasts of Chaos. But the role of the Herdstone has fundamentally changed. So Eat, Pray, Love mentioned earlier, there is no aura that kind of pulses and grows over time. We now no longer summon and stab units to build up primordial core points. So you don't need to have a shaman with some gore sitting next to it, stab, stab. The role has changed now, right? It's still impossible, but basically the big difference that's happened is that from the White Dwarf, you used to get +1 rend to all of the attacks in turn 1, and then in turn 3 you'd get an extra +2 rend, so it would make your units absolutely slap. Now it's essentially delayed a turn, so in turn 2 your units would get +1 rend in melee, and then in turn 4 you'd get +2. Talk to me about how you think about this, how it's impacted even the way that you play. No longer can you be aggressive and rely on that turn 3 rend +2.
Yeah. So with before the herd of the verse, um, the role of the Herdstone was definitely using it for the 4-up rally and just gain a nice bonus of rend all the time. But now it's not that, and now it's on a timer for that bonus rend, and you can build around models to still do that. Like these Zangors are very dependent on the Hearthstone right now. Zangor Host or Zangor Enlighten. And it used to be you wait till round 3 to get that +2 rend and go with those Enlighten and just kill anything. But now you gotta wait till round 4. You really can't be waiting that long for them. So, but Bulgors don't even really need a Herdstone right now. Just paired weapons, or if you just have 9 of them, they're going to be dishing out so many mortal wounds if they're in galley vets. So it's nice that we're not as reliant on the Herdstone as we were before, too. So I feel the obvious nerfs of it, um, not really much at all. But I could imagine if you're building a Zangor list, you are hurting, especially with Enlightened Lost Value. They really used to be round 3 superstars, or Dragon Ogres being round 3 superstars as well. But you lost so much DPS from it, so I'm cautious about taking Enlighten now in my list because
So
of it.
so pull me back for a second,
Yeah.
and how does it all work, right? Because when you think of list construction, are you now thinking about things that can give me the extra boost to rend, right? Because to your point, I can't wait till turn 4 to release my force with its additional
hmm
rend 2, because majority of the battles already happened by turn 4. So does it mean that at list construction, you think about things like Purple Sun, the Chaos Gargant, any ways to reduce rend even further? Does that mean when you look at units, let's say, for example, your Bulgor, perfect example, you're now going to go with the double axe the two-handed weapon as opposed to axe and shield because you need that extra rend? Does that change the way that you look at units now, knowing you don't get those boosts and you can't wait till turn 4 to release the herd?
Yeah, so that has been my thoughts of taking Chaos Gargant or the Purple Sun to just give them that extra rend, and even just Zangor Host as well. Um,
Yep,
to
Jabba Slife is another example. Like, do you
yeah,
look at those things that now they've increased their value? I
yeah,
guess is my question.
yeah, yeah. Value is definitely increased, especially Chaos Gargant getting the Aura of Foulness for -1 save. It's very reasonably cost to get such a good aura and not having to rely on any dice roll, just be within 3 inches. So it's great. We have all those other options, but a lot of the stuff in our book doesn't need the extra Ren. Bulgors, it's sadly not even an option to take Great Axes. All the melee profiles is -1 rend, even Great Axes now. The only difference is the damage, and Great Axes hit on 3s. So more reliable hitting. But Bulgors, they're going for mortal wounds, rolling 6s to hit. and I've been spiking my rolls, so I'm coming from a bias. The Gorgon just really needs its swallow ability. Um, and then the Cygor just provides so much utility outside the combat. Just if it had 2 rend, I'm just thinking like, oh, or 3 rend at a point of the game. Oh, that's an add bonus. It's usually got its value somewhere else. So it's nice and refreshing not having to worry about the Herdstone, because I'm just like, it's off in the corner. I'm gonna tell my opponent what it does, and they can decide if they want to invest any units on destroying it.
By the way, I'm not endorsing the Jabba Scythe at all. I still think it's a bad war scroll. I'm just saying, like, when you at list construction, do you now consider other options to mitigate the loss of Ren that you have? I think one of the sleeper units that I would be now reconsidering is the Ravening Direflock, the endless spell, because you could be on a 5. I know it's on a 5-up, but you can stop units, issuing commands.
Yeah.
So with some smart play, you might be able to stop someone using all-out defense, which then helps you a little. But maybe you're better off putting in a purple sun if you really do find you're not doing the damage, because you need that extra -1 to rend in that turn 2 attack.
Yeah, and then just taking a look at the chat. Oh, you pulled it up. Eat Shaman. Dual axes, completely agree. It's for killing elite stuff. Combine that with Gallivets, so that even those horns are getting in. Is strong too, and even going shields with Bulgors is nice too. You're not losing that many attacks to fishing those 6s. It's only going to be 6 less attacks.
As Justin said as well, Enlighten on disc are also still great. I think it's still a good option.
Shutting down a command ability in the combat phase is still huge. Knowing that you're going to be shutting down the all-out defense is still almost like a theoretical rend, if you put it that way.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, is there other ways to kind of get around it? Because you don't want to wait till turn 4. And there's lots of options, as we've just mentioned.
And I think from how many Enlighten on disc we saw at LVO, disc are balanced now.
Sure.
Yeah.
I will say though, like, yes, you lost a little bit of rend, but you did gain a way more mortal wounds than you had in the past, and that's why I think Tuskor chariots are definitely worth considering. If I was a beast player, I would be, because I run a Stormcast chariot, and I love the mortal wounds on the charge. So they're cheap, they're fast. They can be good on the flanks. They can take up an all-out. They can soak up an Unleash Hell. They can smash the screens. There's a lot of good stuff with the chariot that I think you'll probably see more of them on the battlefield.
Yeah, and they're multi-purpose. That base size is nice for screening too. Just they're a great unit for 95 points.
So cheap. They're so cheap.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your list. Let's talk about list 1. You've got your sub faction, which is the All Herd. Desecrating Bray Herd is the Grand Strat, and Bloodthirsty the Triumph. You've got your Zangor Shaman, which is the General, with Tendrils as the spell. Bestial Cunning is the command trait. They're coming in from 7, not 9. The Slitherak Helm as the artifact, and you've gone Tunnel Master as the aspect of the champion. You have the Great Bray Shaman with the Wild Rampage. You've got another Great Bray Shaman with the Blade Blast Trumpet and Strangle Thorns. Man, so many.
Yeah.
It took me ages to do some of the video. It killed me with some of the spells. I think one of the options killed me. You got 2 units of Bulgor which are being reinforced. They've been reinforced.
Both reinforced. Yeah,
cool. So they're a unit of 6.
Yep, units of 6.
Cool. Then you've got your Gores, you've got 2 Tuskor chariots, and a great utility unit is the Cockatrice. So that comes in 1975. So there's a good chance you'll walk away with Triumph. And you've got Galatian Veterans and Warlord. You're both your Bulgor units having the paired cleaving axes under Galatian champions to get more attacks in. So talk to you about the list. By the way, I just want to call out this comment. It's gold. Chariots are back. Welcome to Beasts of Chaos 1996. And this is what I said to you. It's a blast from the past, from the back from the old days.
Yeah. That's
What's
great.
this list all about? How does it work? How does it win?
I would say this has been kind of pretty traditional list that I've liked to use, and one mistake we made is my Doom Bull's the general. He's just hiding in unbolt text underneath the Zangor
Oh
Shaman.
shit,
So that's
sorry.
how I'm getting battle line. Getting my battle lines there. I promise I'm not cheating.
It's on the screen. I just didn't bold Doombull, so my apologies there. It's actually a legal list.
He
Don't
has the
at me.
spellcast Doom Bull, it's new.
I just read it as tendrils of astrophy Doombull. I'm like, okay, all right, cool.
Yeah.
No, yes, there's a Xangor Shaman with the tendrils and Doombull, which has what I just said: Bestial Cunning, Slitherrack, Tunnel Master. I did wonder how your Shaman had Tunnel Master. I was going to say, wait a second, that doesn't make sense.
Sometimes the best way to win is just cheat, right? No, I'm
Well,
kidding.
to be fair, the Slan's chair doesn't count as a mount, but for the OBR chair, it does count. So maybe the disc, there's like a charity sympathy here.
Hey,
You can be a Tunnel Master.
It's more like a companion, okay? Just because it says it's a mount doesn't mean it identifies as a mount, okay?
Oh,
But all right. But how I actually use the list is usually I'm ambushing with Bulgors with the shields on turn one. Just they're a little bit tankier, and I'm putting the Doom Bull with them too. And the Bulgors with the Paradoxes are my bestial cunning. I'm waiting till round two just to get that perfect opportunity to place them on a key target where I can really get a good lead in the game, combining that with all the blood taunts I do with the Doom Bull and one of my Bray Shamans as well too. I'm using All Herd just for opportunities to regenerate wounds on the unit of 30 Gores. Just it's a pretty tanky unit that they need to get through of, and I'm normally having Cockatrice with them just for the chance of having the laughable of, oh, you can only hit me on sixes. Did that for some chosen. That was the funniest moment of my life. Just watching six chose or 10 chosen do like maybe 6 damage to Gores.
ooh, it's a feel bad.
Yeah, it's like
It is
that was
it is a 4-up though, because at the start of the combat phase, you pick a unit within 6 on a
yeah.
4-up. It takes mortal wounds, and then that triggers off the fact if you've allocated mortal wounds. So it's a 50-50 chance, which is I guess why you've got 2 cockatrice just to
Yeah.
shore those numbers up.
Yeah, really, with the odds in my favors, I've been making my charges, and the Bulgors with the axe and shields have been usually hitting in front of a screen, and they have enough damage output just to kill that and just start creating a threat. Allows me to get on objectives, and the opponent needs to be very conscious about where these Bulgors coming from Bestial Cunning are coming from, because it's anywhere on the field. It's not from the board edge with them 7 inches away. That just makes a lot of opportunity for combining that with Blood Taunt. Taking Brave Brass Trumpet just for usually adding more Gores to my army for if I need some clutch strike glass opportunity, or just to get on objective. Then Vista Stranglethorn, I just find the defensiveness that to be so good. Just stopping a pile-in just can really ruin the damage output for our opponent. Then Tendrils have to be on the Zangor Shaman, just +1 damage, and combine that with Wild Rampage on the Gores. That's just a 1-2 combo to make the Gores really strong. Normally, the Zangor Shaman's not close enough to apply Tendrils where the Bulgors are, so it's usually with the Gores too. Then Chariots and Cockatrices are doing rolls of screens. If I get to charge with the Chariots, that's great. I usually don't get an opportunity to do it. Usually there's something that kills them. But I've been
Really
just trying.
interesting. Like I would imagine, like if I'm the average player and I see a Tusk or Chariot versus some of these other options, and I guess depending on the Bulgur on the table or not, like I look at the Tuskor and it's underwhelming. Like when you look at it, it's a 4-up save, 7 wounds. Yeah, it moves fast, but it's an idiot. Obviously, the charge does some serious damage, but it's compared to some of the other things. Like I look at the Cockatrice, I look at the Shamans, I look at the Zangor, I look at the Bulgur. They're usually more of a target for the traditional player.
Yeah. No, I agree.
But your
with
chariots
that.
seem to be copying it
But
because
yeah, I
like
think they've been just kind of more in front of my gores, as I'm just thinking I want my gores to charge to apply these strikes last. So I've definitely been putting my chariots in a position of them to die first.
fair, fair. And I guess you could always rotate that as well. You could always put your gores as and if you know, obviously you can summon some gore with the Brave Blast Trumpet as well, but for 95 points for 7 wounds, a 10-inch move does mortals on the charge. Uh, I definitely would want to be using those mortals because especially if the unit has 1 or 2 wounds characteristic, you're doing mortals on a 4-up. So that could be a
Yeah.
nice way to clear up those screens, especially if we are going into a bit more of a horde meta now that Galatian veterans are gone.
Yeah. Completely. And just gives me more opportunities to get the battle tactic trample to mulch as well.
Mm.
So that's why I just like having at least 2 chariots in a list just for that real opportunity. I find the Bulgors in a unit of 6 need to really get into a key target to achieve that battle tactic. So yeah, it's been more with my chariots the times I've achieved that battle tactic.
By the way, I didn't get to ask you the question. Bestigor or Worstigor? Where are
Oh,
we at? I forgot to ask.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you were telling me before, prepare yourself. So my opinion is definitely not. They're not as bad if your list is building for it. It's I want to say taking a combination of the spell Wild Rampage, Tendrils, with them too. But I guess just to give context, like Costigors for sure, being 220 points,
They
but
are expensive. They are
they are
expensive.
expensive, and their attack profile is lacking. With only 2 attacks on 3s and 3s, 1 attack being 1 damage too. But I'm looking at more for them of the survivability. It's 220 points for 2 wounds each. So it's 2 units of gores. It's going to achieve the same thing, and they're a base 4-up save. And I'm looking at as, well, I'd rather have 2 wounds each on a model or 1 wound. It's going to be 2 wounds because less opportunity to take battle shock tests as well. And usually it's easier to work with them in a smaller footprint, um, as well
But
too.
but
But
when I look at your points, and ironically enough, Bestigor and Bulgor are next to each other on the points table. When Bulgor are 3 for 195, 4 wounds each, mortals on the charge. Bestigor are 10 for 220. That's a hard decision.
yeah, but Bestigors are like in this weird spot where they're a hybrid of like this anvil and screen, but they're not excelling in the role. But it can be a situation with if you get the right spells off, um, just they can become that hammer that you could need. But then for 440 points, taking 20 of them, they are more wounds than a unit of 30 gores too. So that's the trade-off. I'm thinking it's not as bad, but they could be lower points. And to
Uh,
add, oh, sorry.
No. That was gonna be my point. I think when I look at the Bestigor War Scroll, it's a good War Scroll. Like points aside, it's a good War Scroll. And as Gans mentioned as well, there's a 5-up rally with it.
Yeah,
That's pretty tasty. But the challenge is probably the points are probably a little bit too high. So if in the future where it might decrease 20 points, 25 points, it's not that it's a bad War Scroll. It's potentially like you get to add +1 attack if the enemy uses all out defense. That's pretty good. Subtract 1 from the wounds characteristic if they are charging into a unit with Unleash Hell. That's pretty good. So as a War Scroll, it's actually pretty solid. It's just that potentially it's competing with other units of a similar value. And it's hard to just like 2 attacks, 3s and 3s. It's quite consistent. 1 damage.
yeah, and probably the coolest synergy I saw between the Bestigor that when they're on the battlefield is with Bulgors too. So one of the Bestigor's rules is if an enemy does the all-out defense command ability within 3 inches of them, they get +1 attack. That's when their damage skyrockets, and it's like, okay, they're worth their points. But if you're in combat with Bestigors and Bulgors, like even if they're on two separate things, the opponent's not going to do all-out defense on their unit. Then giving the Bestigors the opportunity just to hit them, but then they're going to actually be wasting that command ability on the unit with the Bulgors, which the Bulgors don't care. They're fishing for mortal wounds too. That's the primary amount of their damage. I found that to be a cool synergy. That essentially I've been having opponents waste command points because they're like, oh, I'm not going to use that. Might as well do it here. And next turn comes around, they're low on command points. Just thought I'd add that cool little knick-knack about them.
I think the question here is that combination, assuming you reinforce the Doom Bulls, is that combination worth 500-600 points? And that's not for us to decide. It's up for you to decide, the viewer. But I think for me, it's just like, oh, it's hard to justify. And you even mentioned like reinforcing the unit. That's as Eat, Pray, Love mentioned, same price as Chaos Warriors. It's hard to look over the fence when you do actually ally into Slaves to the Darkness and go, I could get, something a bit more tankier. I could get some things, but it does have utility. I'm not here to poo-poo Bestigor. I think maybe if points decrease slightly, you'd see more of them. There is some good features, but it's competing in roles that I think I'm better served elsewhere.
Yep, for sure. And
But,
I think,
but to your point, you do make some good points, and I don't think it's all doom and gloom because there are some other things. Centaur, for example, I think the ignoring the first 2 damage every combat phase has some play. But again, its points now is very similar to some other things.
Yeah, and to go back to what we've talked about is with this book, you can right now build competitive lists to like for me, I naturally like to gravitate towards something that's not really considered meta right now. It's been who a little bit of background is I played Bretonians in fantasy because I thought knights were cool, but then I liked that they were kind of crappy, and I liked figuring out that puzzle. And that was part of the reason I started with Beasts of Chaos too, is they weren't a popular army, and I loved them in Warhammer Total War. And right now, just people talking about Bestigors, just my brain is flaring up, be like, try out this model, try to make them work. So far, found a way to make them work, but at the end of the day, it's like, man, I wish I had more points.
Listen, last night I submitted a list for an upcoming little tournament that I almost ran the Squig Gobber, and I'm like, I've got some crack science with my Gobberpalooza, but at the end of the day, it's the same price as 10 Squig Hoppers, and I cowered it in the final like 30 minutes. But I'm like you, I'm someone who really likes to dig deep and avoid a little bit from the meta choices and try to find other combinations, and often it can throw opponents off as well. So John mentioning, and for me, when you think about it, at what cost do you think something like Bestigor, would you pick Bestigor instead of Gors or Ungor? For me, I think it's around, I'm throwing this number out of my backside, like 160, 170 maybe. 150 is probably too cheap, but if it was around like 170, and like these, like maybe we're cooking with gas a little here, especially if like the Doom Bull isn't my general. I don't know. What are your thoughts with point?
For me, just 20 points. I kind of like, I'm looking at more of them for the survivability than ever damage output. So 10 points per wound is usually good in my book. So if we can get them down to at least 200 points, I'll be really happy with that, just because they have added effects, they already have a natural rend, and they have 2-inch reach, so they don't need to rely on Glacian veterans as well too. And
Yeah, and as Gan said as well, it depends on the sub faction.
yeah,
Look, this has been probably too much Bestigor talk, to be honest with you. Way too much Bestigor. The other option we want to share is Quake Fray. And obviously, by the way, folks, this is just one of many examples. We're not here to say this is the list to run. It's just an example of how Brian's putting his list together. But hey, there's been plenty of times, like I said, I would never leave home without a Cygor. I would have had a Cygor in that list somehow. Maybe I wouldn't have 2 Cockatrice. Maybe I look into Slaves to Darkness as an ally. Maybe I bring in like the Doom Bull or the Bullfire Taurus, or there's so many different options that you can tweak and modify, but at least this is a base. Now the other option, and there is no hidden Zangor throwing Doom Bulls in this list. You've got the Great Bray Shaman. By the way, this is a Quake Fray, same grand strategy. You've got your Great Bray Shaman, which is the general. Twist Fray Cursed Beast is the command trait. Arcane Tome is going to be your artifact, and Tendrils is the spell that you've chosen. You've got your Doom Bull, very similar combination, the Slitherrack Helm and the Tunnel Master as the aspect of the champion. You've also got your Zangor Shaman with Wild Rampage. You've got a Cygor. You've got your Bestigor Reinforced. No wonder you were defending Bestigor so much.
Yeah, you thought we were escaping that conversation. I'm pulling us back in.
I completely forgot. You've also got Gore. You've got a Chaos Gargant. You've got your Bulgor. You've got your Cockatrice, 2 of them, and your Doomfire Taurus and your Doom Bull Dirigible, Doom Blast Dirigible Horn. So, what's this list all about? How's it different, and how does it work?
So, with this, it's going to be dependent. Only one unit of Bulgors, definitely ambushing them, just looking for opportunity to use them to get some serious damage. I am going to be more cautious with them. I'm probably not going to just throw them into a screen, and definitely depends on turn order as well too, and just what happens with blood taunts. Like, what if I pull like a Enry General like 12 inches away? Obviously, that's going to create an opportunity. So it just does come down to some dice rolls of how spicy am I feeling to use those Bulgors on. But Bestigors are just kind of using them as pretty much a anvil in my army, just giving them Mystic Shield, and just the support of the Cockatrice as well, and it might have the support of my Doom Bull, just depending on how my heroic actions are going. But it's definitely much playing it for the longer game, and I'm trickling them with Mortal Wounds. So they're spellcast heavy with the Cygor, and it's going to have the Curse prayer as well too, just for that opportunity. And I'm using a lot of Strike Glass with the Wildfire Taurus and gain those consistent spell casts to make my Brayherd units like the best score very opportunity to be combat focused, to become a hammer for with Tendrils of Apathy and Wild Rampage too. Just Zangor Shaman has a once per game for a +3 spell cast, and Great Bray Shaman, depending on the turn order, is going to be a very reliable spell cast to get some 2 nasty spells off when I need them. And Wildfire Taurus, just applying Strike Last debuff. The Doomblast Dirge Horn has been actually a secret MVP. Just placing it in a wild, if there's wildwood terrain, just placing it in there so they can't target for a dispel. That aura gets pretty massive, but the Cygor can still actually consume the spell if I need to heal it. So he kind of hovers around where the Doomblast Dirge Horn is, and it's actually just a nice utility where if I need to reposition that Dirge Horn, good chance I can dispel it and just place it somewhere else. It's been a cool tech that 6-inch range really helps a lot with it.
And it's dirt cheap. It's 30 points. It's, you're still coming in at 1975. So if you wanted a different endless spell, you had the points to increase and change that. But for 30 points, it's not a bad option. And what I love about this list as well is if you're someone who doesn't like Bestigor, for the same points, you could take some disc Zangor. Whatever flavor you want. You could take a double reinforced unit of Fiend Bloods. To lean into the Quake Fray a little bit more, you could take a Gorgon. Take 2 Gorgons as well if you want to go Monster Mash, or a second Cygor. So the flexibility is here to build the list that you want. And who are your hammers? Like who's doing the damage here? Obviously, your Bulgor definitely your damage dealers.
My Bulgors are definitely my hammer, and I would consider my only ones. And then depending on spell casts, just creates the opportunity for everyone to participate in being a hammer. That's more how the list works. one thing is the Chaos Gargant MVP in this list. Just I find it naturally just creates a 12 wound threat. I used to run a Beast Lord because I was thinking of some like, oh, activating the Bestigor, getting them to hit on 2s and 2s maybe, but I just find that, man, if that Beast Lord gets within 3 inches, he dies by something out of my control, gets sniped by a spell, just doesn't have that survivability because he needs to be up in the front doing something. While the Chaos Gargant, for the same points, I just get more value out of him. And some of my games, especially, worked well with Slaves to Darkness. Reducing their save by 1 just really helps a lot. So makes
Well,
best
you're
scores, Ren 2.
Well, you're a monstrous rampage as well. You could do, you could shut down, do a roar. You could do a stomp for a couple of extra mortal
Yeah.
wounds. Obviously, counting more on the objective, which is great as well. There's a lot of cool options here, and I think that's the interesting thing is like, what is my army trying to do? Who are my hammers? Who are my anvils? Who are my tech support pieces? And what's coming in from the side? What's coming in from ambush? What is because I think for me, like I think one thing that I'd love to see a bit more of in like a list like this, and this is not like me being critical of your list, but I do love like the Ungor Raiders. I love the ability to shoot off the board. It's some cheap bodies and I can see some good tech there, as with the heroic action or the rituals of ruin.
Yeah. For me, it's funny. I feel like Ungor Raiders have taken the role of like the old cockatrice because at the end of the day, they're still hitting and wounding on 4s and 4s, but there's a large volume of the body. And, if anyone's been living on the rock, there used to be a moment of take 17 cockatrices. And, I have so many. But naturally, I'm going to get a lot more wounds. I feel like Ungors have kind of taken that role, and I'm excited for that. I laugh and I feel like, oh, it's gonna be great hearing the day of like someone's like, I killed Archeon with like my 60 Ungor Raiders.
Do you see a world where you take something like Dragon Ogres, which used to be quite popular in the other build, because they're much more of a tanky type survival piece, not as much damage as a Bulgor? Do you see those coming into play at all?
I if if those were definitely less points, and they're in a weird spot too where I cannot find a good use for them because it's nice that they have a natural heal on 3 up, but you're paying 225 points for definitely a lot stronger attacks now. Each one gained 5 attacks at 1 rend, doing 2 damage. That's really good, but Bulgors have been just such always exceeding my expectations. It's hard for me. Just haven't had enough time to be like, okay, I'm ready to move on and start testing them out.
Yeah, and that's why when you look at other people's lists, people are taking Bulgor. It's just that they are consistent damage dealers. They have good amount of wounds. The mortal
Yeah.
wounds are attractive. They just play a really good role. I'm pretty high on Slaanesh Fiendbloods, the Slangors. Am
Yeah.
I on crack? Have I been smoking something, or is it actually? Do you think they're all right?
I think they're definitely all right. Game them having fight again with strike glass is definitely very powerful. Combining that with tendrils, and it's 130 points for 9 wounds on the field that definitely slap in combat. So I would say they're winners there. And if you combine the Slake Rack Helm for the extra 3-inch movement, they get up the field fast because you can pop their D6 movement with your heroic action alone, too. So they are very speedy, and
Mm.
I know of some lists of it's all about I am up in your face with Bulgors, Chariots, Slangors, and it kind of makes this what do I attack first? Like,
What do you think about some of the monsters? Like, I'm conscious that we've spoken a lot about certain units, but
hmm
there's some other couple of things I want to talk about before I kind of start drilling in and start wrapping up the show. One being people love monsters, and we haven't really spoken about the Manticore, the Jabberslith, the Chimera. not Manticore. We don't have a Manticore. Chimera, the Chimera and the Jabberslith. At least we haven't spoken about. Where do they stand in competitive beast lists?
So Chimera used to be my go-to. Is if I bank something and got 10 points, there was an opportunity to just have it go slap something and still kind of play the slot machine. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
It could excel, but its damage profile greatly reduced with it being a lot less Ren with one of the heads.
Yeah, the
Lost less
avian head gives you like Ren
damage.
-3 or something base.
Yeah, yeah. So it lost a lot of damage. It's a little bit more consistent with a hero babysitting where it's hitting on 4s and 3s. Its profile used to be all over the place where it was like 3s and 4s, 4s and 4s, 4s and 3s. It was a nightmare to remember. But for 185 points for 12 wounds, granted it doesn't bracket, but it majority losing its bonus to charge is I don't know. It's shooting attack. It's just a nice add bonus. Never really relied on it. It used to be D6 mortal wounds, but now it's only D3. But I think there's just better monsters. The Cygor, Gorgon, Chaos Gargant overshadowing it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it lost too many things. Like if it kept the +2 to its charge, and then made it +3 if you obviously come in from ambush, then it has a role. It had a role, but now that it's not there,
I would say it's great. It lost stuff and went down in points, unlike the Jabberslith that lost stuff and then went up in points. Don't know who made that decision. I feel like
I think they just wanted you to stop buying them. Like, please stop buying them. We can justify to the board we're retiring the molds.
Yeah, and then the Shaggoth, we've talked about that, went up so many points. I believe that if I took a good look, there's supposed to be an added 0 somewhere. Maybe it's supposed to be 100 wounds. Maybe it's supposed to move 80 inches. Maybe it's supposed to do 20 d6 attacks. We're missing a 0 somewhere for it being 275 points.
Fair. What about your ally pool? And I'm going to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions to kind of bring us home. No, you have to rapid answer, but allies, Slaves to Darkness, hot in the meta right now, incredibly successful. You're seeing really good things. People loving Chosen and Varangard, and they're throwing around all the great things. And you've even got some Ogoroids as well that would fit quite well. Do you think there are some interesting options? And yes, I'll get to the Incarnate in a minute. Eat, pray, love. Do you think there's anything in the Slaves to Darkness that would be worth considering? Maybe it fills a void that your book doesn't offer at the moment.
The Curvus Cabal, just have a unit in reserve that can drop down anywhere, because it's hard to predict what the game's going to look like in round 3 or 4. And needing them to drop down objective, that's always going to be use. To then with the Cockatrice, just having some needed randomness, potential protection for, say, Vanguard or Chosen, I feel is actually viable in Beasts of Chaos, but it definitely works better the other way around. For me, other than Corvus Cabal, that's going to be only my top pick if I was going to ally anyone, or Untamed Beast for the pregame move too. But for myself, I'm keeping it at that. I still need to explore so much around in the book.
Yeah. And there was one thing you lost was the Ungor Raiders were popular because of the pre-game move. It's lost that. So if you are someone who wants that, and I don't know, Iron Jaws or Suns, for example, are really popular in your meta, then maybe getting those Untamed Beasts would get you that Ungor Raider screen that you used to enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. I used to always be running like 20 or 30 of them in my list before. I definitely missed them for their pre-game move, and definitely Corvus Cabal just looked more value for me. Like I said, we lost a lot of speed. We rely on ambush to get to where we are, unless if you're taking that command trait for more movement.
It could be an easy desecrate their lands, like straight up. That just scores you a battle tactic, 1 of 5 done. Thoughts on the ally Mega Gargant? Would you consider a Mega Gargant like One-Eyed Grunlock in your list? 500 point meat.
We have so many debuffs everywhere, and that unit gives a -1 to hit. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you can debuff stack with that mercenary quite well, and I think it would make for a very fun game for your end and probably not your opponent.
I just don't think you have 500 points to spare, to be honest.
I don't know. Combine it like the Dirge Horn could apply -1 to wound. If you do chaos bonds for -1 to attack, you start getting this chaos, this very tanky chaos gargant, but it's gonna be tough. Yeah, for 420ish points, I believe.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what I don't know what Mega Garden it is. Is it the
It's
you
the
got the War
mercenary one.
Stomper? Oh, you got the War Stomper one. He's 470. No, you don't. Unless his points went down. But no.
Yeah,
But
shoot.
if I'm spending 500 odd points, it's going into something like the Incarnate. Would you consider an Incarnate in your list?
Yeah. The more I've initially thought like, oh, it wasn't gonna quite work out because we're so tight on points, but then it fills a lot of rules, just something that can last for 2 turns. Is going to be very helpful in our lists, especially when we're already down bodies. Just having something, knowing that all right, it can't die until 2 turns, and then our spells complement with it. Tendrils would still work for it, I believe, because that's just, or yeah, definitely actually quote me on that. I'm not sure if the damage is tied to Beast of Chaos keyword or not.
That's all right. It's so fun.
Yeah, but
Is that
I still feel we have a lot of
tendril?
support. Yeah,
Is that
tendrils of
tendrils?
atrophy.
Tendrils. Nope. Just if successfulully cast, pick one enemy unit within range invisible,
Oh,
add 1 to the damage inflicted. So, no, not tied to.
yeah,
And by the way, Justin's called out 420 is the number for the Mega Gargant. Thank you.
hell yeah, 420. Best point costs. But yeah, we just have a lot of support and we get a lot of utility with the incarnate. Spells being so good, especially from the Brave Shaman's lore, that bonus to cast, it's gonna be very useful. Just a lot of utility with it.
So, talk to me. Maybe like two final questions. One, how do you win? And I guess this is probably a question that a lot of people who are new to the faction, given that it's a whole refresh, no longer is it the wave of trash, cheap bodies, maximum rend from the war shrine, the bloody the Herdstone.
Hmm.
How do you win? There's now a lot more tech pieces, a lot more trickiness, a lot more ambushing, and as you
Yeah.
said, strike last, mortal wounds, movement. What's some things you'd tell me to help me win my games?
Yeah, be patient with your ambushers. If there doesn't look like you're gonna get a good opportunity, especially saying you're running the classic 6 Bulgors, and that's your really only big damage dealer, wait for that round 2. Just make sure they're getting in a spot that they're gonna be doing damage, and you're most likely gonna be trading them out too. So make sure they're getting their point costs worth. That would be the number one mistake I could see any new Beast of Chaos players going. Just I'm gonna ambush with everything. Not everything needs to get up in the opponent's face. But then don't be scared to ambush a lot and just deploy them off to the side of the objective. And don't worry about your Herdstone unless your list is really focusing on that running Zangors. So being patient and knowing where to take your fights is going to matter where you're rolling blood taunts and how good they are. So there's a lot of moving pieces with this book, and it's going to be a struggle for a new player figuring out. It's one of the most techiest books out there now.
Do you like going high drops or low drops, or it doesn't matter with this book?
I I am going right now. Been testing high drops because I would rather test myself getting double turned and seeing how that feels with it. And it's been feeling good. Probably the previous book felt better, but I can see us going towards Battle Regiment is going to be pretty key now. And the more games I'm playing, the more it's like, man, if I had the opportunity to double turn them, would have been nice.
Why? Why? I'm not going to let you. I'm
But
not going to let you
yeah,
make that statement. Like, why
it's
is
like
low drops
say
becoming
say if
important?
I was patient enough and I waited for round 2, or I got a really good charge round 1 with Bulgors, and it was actually the bottom of the round, and I went second. So I got in a position where I killed a key target, and if it became my turn again, those Bulgars are probably finishing the game right there. And in a lot of events, like LVO, it actually works better killing your opponent faster to deny their battle tactics for extra scoring. So that's what I've been seeing in some of my games. That's like, oh, I wish I had the opportunity to take a double turn here.
So you're going in for like hoping to give away, obviously lists and battle plans and
Yeah.
things come into play, but in your ideal world, turn one, you're giving away the top of the turn. So you can go turn one, hopefully win the priority going to turn two. So you got a double turn and do maximum damage and not rely on turn three, turn four, where the attrition starts to kick in. You still haven't got your Ren +2 bonus yet. I tend to agree, Justin. Obviously, list dependent. I find going from turn two to turn three, that double turn is often the most important, and
Yeah.
I'll often give away the top of turn two so I don't get double turn from two to three. That's my personal preference, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I just find those Bulgars just have such good opportunity for if you can get the double turn, just their damage is gonna be crazy.
All right, I asked you a final question, and I can't remember who asked earlier. It might have been Mason, and Mason had said, "Why no new units?" And I said to you, I'd ask you at the end, if you got to choose a new unit. Let's say you get to add something to the book. What would you add? And chat, by the way, if you're listening to this on replay, put it in the comments. I want to hear live chat. Who's here today? Tell me what they would add. But what would you add?
What I would add in the book is, mm, man, I just miss having, man, the traditional role of the shotgun. But I won't do that cop out. I would just add something that could ambush later in the game. I think it's just fun always having that option, something that could just ambush later in the game. Obviously, we can ally in that, but I sometimes feel ally is a cop out of not playing your book. Too, and then the dream would be having a big centerpiece model, like something like Moger, as well.
I'm sorry. Like I'm going to avoid the low hanging fruit that Kragnos should be Beast of Chaos. Like that's
I know, right?
I'm not going to say it.
He's a damn giant centaur. Why don't we have him?
I know I'm not going to. Morgo definitely is the most popular choice, but I think one thing I do miss, and I'm a little bit disappointed that I didn't carry over into the new book, but the marked Beasts of Chaos for the different gods. And I know yes, Morgo, they're kind of the children of the chaos. They don't have an alignment. But I love the idea of being able to have, and when you look at the command traits, there's one that's each actually allied to the different chaos gods. And I think for me, at least the lore and at least the conversion opportunities would have loved to have seen some ways to tap into the chaos gods if you want to be slightly corrupted. So like your Pestigors, your Korngors, that to me would have been a lot of fun and would have created a whole lot of opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, like probably the biggest devil advocate is like, well, that's not copy Slaves to Darkness, but then for me, this book gained a lot of mortal wounds, but then I felt like having such high rend was such a fun theme with the army. I felt like the mortal wound output was kind of a cop out from that removing fun theme. It was fun telling an opponent my rend is like -5 with Bulgors or -4, and it's just like, do you want all out defense? Well, it's not gonna matter. Like,
Fun for you.
yeah. But I thought that damage output was just a fun theme that was unique to Beast of Chaos. Um, but then it's weird that like we have the Zangors, we have the Slangor. It's like might as well just add the Pestigor and Korngor, then just complete the circle. Like,
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing more monsters too. You are the Beasts of Chaos. Give me a few more mutilated monsters that kind of fit into the faction. But look, you didn't lose a lot, which was surprising. Certainly, there's been a redesign. Certainly, there's opportunity for the future. Hopefully, we stay in this season a little longer, and hopefully, there is a Beasts of Chaos Part 2, like there has been to like Lumineth Part 7. And we see some expansions here and there. But Brian, is there anything that you want to say? Any shout outs you want to make? If people want to follow you, you are on Twitter. Twitter handle is under your name on the screen. You're also an active community member on my Discord. Papa
Bear. I have many names. Sorry, I'm so confused.
I was going to call you Papa Nurgle. I'm like, no, that's not right.
No, my more traditional username is Papa Bear, but if you find me in a jersey with the name Coxitris, that's me too. But I also go as just Brian Cox as well. But I do have an announcement to make, and this is gonna come at me with a heavy heart because this does reference to the news, a dear friend of mine, and I just wrote a little something.
I'm gonna spotlight you. Give me a second.
Okay,
go for it.
Thank you. So let me say something about Matt, the news, the former best Beast of Chaos player. I do want to say just thank you, Matt, for pushing Beast of Chaos. When we are at our lowest point, you changed the meta with that LVO 4-1 win back in 2022, not with Bulgars. It inspired me. That was my first grand tournament. And you helped me think differently with Beast of Chaos. Helped us all think creative differently with Beast of Chaos. A debt that can never be repaid. But it's time to look towards the future. And with good conscience, I cannot hide a secret that I've learned from the news. This is almost a scandal. He is scared of the new book. He's not going to lead us in this new book. And let me tell you why. He told me he's purposely going to a new GT next weekend, playing with the old Beast of Chaos book so that he can buffer his own ITC ratings for this year because he's that scared of this new book. I'll pause for a dramatic effect and gasping in the chat. Now, how could News betray his fellow goats, cows, horses, chickens, weird lizards with half ogre torsos, and with adoption papers finally signed, horny crabs? It's clear the News cannot be in position of power to influence us ever again, and I'll take it upon myself to make sure this doesn't happen. March 11th, at the most prestigious of events, Sparkle Party 8, or also known as the Ocho, I will grudge match him to purposely tank his ITC rating to make sure he will never be a Beast of Chaos influencer again. Now, I would like to say a word to the boards of approvals of Sparkle Party Deathmatch, the 8th, or the Ocho. Please approve this request. Don't let this scandal go unpunished. Approve this grudge match. Thank you. Chaos bless Morgan.
It's on. It's on like Donkey Kong. And if people want to see Matt's response, he's actually doing an LVO recap with me next week. But Matt did an incredible job, by the way. If you want to hear more about Beast of Chaos, I would point you towards Warhammer Weekly, where Vince and Tyler got to sit down with Anuj and he got to share a lot of his thoughts. So I guess upon reflection and hearing what Brian, you've said, it feels like we are in a good spot. It's not my army. I shouldn't call it we. I think the book is in a good spot. Yes, it has changed fundamentally. Yes, some war scrolls have changed. Yes, points can get adjusted over time. So fear not. Some things may be overcosted, but they will get refixed over time. But at the same time, you shouldn't shelf this army. It feels like it still has legs. It still be competitive. Tournaments are going to kick on again. I think a lot of people are going to take Beast of Chaos. And I think they'll still do well. I truly do think they'll do well. Will they be winning the two biggest tournaments across the world in the same week? Maybe not, but that's probably a good thing. We want to bring them back into that fair power level, but we still want them being competitive. That's what I feel, and I think we are in a good spot, Brian.
Yeah. I just want to end is new book that's completely different. It's a world of unknown. I would be hesitant of saying anyone like these are the facts about it. This is how you can only win with the book. I wouldn't trust that. It's been so little time. We're in our honeymoon phase, and we were just frankly too damn strong in the old book too. So obviously anything new was gonna feel worse.
It's funny actually, because in Facebook I do see a lot of like really negative comments, and then I saw the same people respond like a week later, like, "Oh, I get to play the book for the first time. It's actually pretty good." Like here's all the things that I learned, and actually what I thought was bad wasn't so bad, and actually what I didn't realize or appreciate is actually quite strong. So it's not all doom and gloom. And and I think my last comment would be is to keep discussing the faction in Discord, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you prefer. If you want a Discord, down below is my link, and I've got a very active Discord, but chat wherever you want to chat. Keep talking, keep list teching, keep the farm going, and working out the combinations and the synergy, so you guys can really understand. This is not a book that you just like minor tweaked. This is literally a redesign. So you'll find some hidden list tech and some science that I think is probably untapped just yet from anybody. So Brian, thank you so much. This has been great. Thank you for everyone who joined the live stream. What's this? Beast of Chaos were the lowest tier for like 20 years. This winning holiday was a nice breather. Look, as a Gits player, I'm about to enjoy about a month or two of really strong Gits performances, and then I'm going to get smashed by points. So I'll be feeling you all. But thank you so much again, much appreciated, and I will chat to you all again soon. Brian, you're a legend. Thank you for your insights.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show. It was great.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AOS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a double one on a spellcast.